A Boeing 747 was ready to take off on the runway. Amidst the dense fog, the pilot raised the thrust lever and turned on the headlights. The aircraft had now crossed the takeoff speed, a speed from which it is almost impossible to return. But at this moment, a shadow began to appear in the fog. This shadow was another Boeing 747, now only a few meters away, moving in the opposite direction on the same runway. It is hard to imagine what happened next. The question is, how did the situation reach this point? What was the air traffic controller doing? And what was that one small mistake that led to the deadliest accident in aviation history? This tragic event occurred in Spain's Canary Islands, an incident the world now remembers as the Tenerife airport disaster. To fully understand this story, we must go back to the day before the accident. The story begins on March 26, 1977, when Pan Am Flight 1736, a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, took off from Los Angeles International Airport. Its planned route was to land in New York, pick up additional passengers, and then proceed to its final destination, Las Palmas, a city in the Canary Islands. This was a chartered flight, completely full, with most passengers being older adults looking forward to a cruise in Las Palmas. Las Palmas is the capital of the Canary Islands. It is the southernmost part of Spain, located about 100 kilometers from the coast of Morocco. This place is famous worldwide for its tropical climate. However, in 1977, behind the beautiful scenery of the Canary Islands, political tensions were brewing. A group called MPIAC was advocating for the independence of the Canary Islands from Spain. As part of their campaigns, this group often resorted to violence, and one such violent event marked the beginning of a tragic disaster. Pan Am Flight 1736 had picked up passengers from New York's JFK International Airport and was headed to Las Palmas. Its crew included 56-year-old Captain Victor Grubbs, 39-year-old First Officer Robert Bragg, and 46-year-old Flight Engineer George Warnes, along with 13 flight attendants and 380 passengers. These were the details of Pan Am Flight 1736 as it cruised over the Atlantic Ocean. Now, let's turn to the other aircraft that would become a victim of this disaster. KLM Flight 4805 was being prepared at Amsterdam Airport in the Netherlands. It was also a Boeing 747, and it, too, was destined for Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. In its cockpit, there were 3 passengers, 50-year-old Captain Jacob, 42-year-old First Officer Klaas, and 48-year-old Flight Engineer William. They were among the 11 crew members and 235 passengers on board. KLM Flight 4805 took off from Amsterdam International Airport after boarding. Now, both aircraft were headed towards Las Palmas Airport in the Canary Islands. Meanwhile, at Las Palmas Airport, 2 men moved towards the terminal building and, after leaving a bag outside a flower shop, disappeared. The bag contained a bomb with a countdown timer. At exactly 1 p.m., a phone call came to the reception of Las Palmas Airport. The person on the other end revealed his connection to the MPIAC group, the same group mentioned at the beginning of the video, and warned that in the next 15 minutes, a bomb would detonate at Las Palmas Airport. The airport staff immediately sprang into action and evacuated the entire airport within 15 minutes. Their panic turned to terror when, exactly 15 minutes later, a huge explosion occurred. The blast caused a large part of the terminal building's roof to collapse. After this, the airport became inaccessible. All activities were suspended, and all flights were cancelled. The flights that were supposed to land there were diverted. After some time, KLM Flight 4805, coming from Amsterdam, had reached near Las Palmas. However, the air traffic controller informed the crew about the explosion at the airport and instructed them to land at Tenerife Island Airport, which was 110 kilometers away. After a 25-minute flight, the captain of KLM landed on runway 30 of Tenerife Airport at 1:38 p.m. At the same time, Pan Am Flight 1736, arriving from New York, had also approached Las Palmas and was diverted to Tenerife Airport. By then, nearly all flights were being redirected to Tenerife Airport since it was the nearest available airport. Soon, the airport became overcrowded. It's important to note that Tenerife Airport is quite small and located in a hilly area. Situated at an elevation of around 2,000 feet and very close to the Atlantic Ocean, the area is surrounded by high mountains. Because of this, when moist winds from the Atlantic collide with the mountains and rise, they cool rapidly, forming clouds. Sudden weather changes are very common here. When the Pan AM and KLM flights landed at Tenerife Airport, visibility was perfectly fine. However, soon after, clouds rolled in, drastically reducing visibility. At times, visibility on the runway dropped to just 300 meters, only to improve the next moment, allowing clear sight up to 2 kilometers. How long they had to stay at the airport was not confirmed at the moment. The passengers disembarked so they could freshen up a little after the long flight. KLM Flight 4805, which was scheduled to return to Amsterdam, decided to refuel here so that when Las Palmas Airport reopened, time wouldn't be wasted refueling there. They had just begun refueling when news came that Las Palmas had reopened. Both flights reboarded their passengers, but the taxiway was blocked due to KLM's refueling. Tenerife Airport is a small airport with only one runway, one taxiway, and one apron where the terminal is built, as you can see in this animation. It was quite unusual to have such heavy congestion here, especially with Boeing's jumbo jets. Because KLM Flight 4805 was refueling, Pan AM could not leave the terminal and proceed to the runway. They were then instructed to wait near the terminal until KLM's refueling was completed. 4:45 p.m. The LM refueling was over, and the captain began preparing to move off the taxiway as the apron was crowded with other planes blocking the path. To reach the east end of the runway for takeoff, the controller instructed the KLM pilots, who were parked on the far west side of the taxiway, to taxi along the runway, make a 180 degrees turn to the extreme east end, and prepare for departure. When KLM 4805 started taxiing, the controller instructed Pan AM Air to follow KLM on the runway but exit onto the taxiway via exit C3, as KLM 4805 was scheduled to take off from that runway. Visibility was extremely poor and worsening by the minute. KLM 4805 crossed the entire runway while taxiing and completed a 180 degrees turn to a line at the eastern end. Meanwhile, the pilots of Pan AM Air also began taxiing on the runway. However, due to the thick fog, they could see exit C1 and C2 but missed exit C3, possibly because it curved back toward the apron, making it harder to spot. Additionally, Tenerife Airport lacked proper signage. Runway exits were typically marked on the tarmac, but these indicators were missing. As Pan AM Flight 736 was passing exit C2, the captain of KLM 4805 requested takeoff clearance from the control tower. At this point, a series of rapid miscommunications ensued. Neither plane was visible from the tower due to the fog, and the pilots had no visual confirmation of the runway or each other. A radar system was installed at the airport. At this time, the control tower started telling KLM which route to take after takeoff. However, nowhere in this message were they given permission to take off. Yet, KLM thought they might have already received clearance, and the captain replied, "We are at takeoff." Now, it's unclear whether he said, "We are at takeoff," or, "We are taking off." In response, the control tower said, "Okay." But after a few seconds, they clarified, "Stand by for takeoff, I will call you." This was a critical message explicitly instructing them not to take off yet. However, KLM's cockpit never received it because, at that moment, the pilot of Pan AM Flight 736, who was listening to the conversation near taxiway C3 on the runway, also transmitted a message, "We are still on the runway." As a result, the control tower's "Stand-by" instruction and Pan Am's message were transmitted simultaneously, causing only a distorted noise in KLM's cockpit. Meanwhile, Pan AM Flight 736, which had inadvertently passed C3, was instructed by the control tower to report when exiting the runway. The Pan AM crew acknowledged with "OK," but by then, KLM Flight 4805's captain had already advanced the thrust levers, assuming takeoff clearance had been granted. At this point, KLM's flight engineer, who had heard the control tower's message to Pan AM, urgently warned the captain that the other aircraft was still on the runway. For some reason, though, the captain likely misheard the noise and simply replied, "Oh, yes," before continuing the takeoff. Due to the fog, he could only see an area of 300 meters. Meanwhile, the Pan AM pilots suddenly noticed a huge gap in the runway. Then, headlights appeared amidst the fog. At first, they thought the KLM flight had stopped, but the next moment, they realized it was moving toward them at high speed. They immediately tried to turn the plane, but it was too late. The right engine of the KLM aircraft tore through the first-class section of the Pan AM plane. The landing gear also broke, and the aircraft skidded 150 meters down the runway before a terrible fire erupted. Since its fuel tank was full, the intensity of the flames can easily be imagined. All 248 passengers aboard the KLM flight died on the spot. The passengers on the Pan Am flight didn't even get a chance to process what had happened. While the first-class passengers perished immediately, many in the economy class below managed to escape through a hole in the roof. Many jumped from a height of 20 feet. Out of the 396 passengers on Pan Am Flight 1736, only 61 survived. Perhaps more could have survived, but due to the fog, the control tower learned about the accident only after some time, and only when another plane on the apron noticed flames on the runway and alerted the tower. The rescue vehicles were also delayed because of the poor visibility. In this disaster, a total of 583 lives were lost in an instant. During the investigation, the cockpit voice recorders of both planes were examined, revealing the full details, which you've now seen in this video. The investigative team concluded that a chain of events led to the tragedy. First, the bomb scare at Las Palmas diverted flights, then, KLM overfilled its fuel tanks and blocked the taxiway at Tenerife Airport. Had this not happened, Pan Am Flight 1736 would have taken off much earlier. Additionally, visibility dropped suddenly, and the Pan Am crew missed the C3 exit. However, the investigation ultimately held the crew of KLM Flight 4805 responsible. They had initiated takeoff without clearance, despite the flight engineer warning the captain just 5 seconds earlier. The Tenerife Airport disaster became a wake-up call for the entire aviation industry. After this accident, many changes were implemented in the aviation industry. The call science was revised, and its rules were updated. Radar became mandatory at all airports, and holding points with runway indicators were also made compulsory. Today, 2 airports operate on Tenerife Island, the original northern airport and a newly constructed one in the south. The southern airport is situated at a lower altitude, reducing the impact of clouds and fog on visibility. I hope you all enjoyed this video from the Million Mile Microscope. Thank you for your kind comments. Don't forget to like and share. Stay tuned for the next exciting video. See you then.